Welcome back to our last session. So I'm Devin Curtis. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Politics and International Studies. And I've been involved with Cambridge Africa for a number of years. And one of the most wonderful things, I think, about being involved in Cambridge Africa has been just to see the enormous range, the diversity of work that's being done at Cambridge with African partners in all sorts of different disciplines, different subjects. I mean, over the years that I've been working with people from Cambridge Africa, I've learned about so many things that I never thought I would learn about. So, for instance, genomic selection tools in Ashanti dwarf pigs, to understanding protest movements across Africa, to looking at drug resistance in malaria, to looking at the depiction of homosexuality in Ugandan literature. So I think there's just this huge range of topics that are being explored at Cambridge with African partners and all sorts of different subjects. And I think that we saw a lot of that today over the course of the day. I'm also a member of the Cambridge African Studies Centre, and that's a centre that brings together scholars in the arts, social sciences, and humanities, and we work closely with Cambridge Africa. Recently, it was our 50th anniversary here at Cambridge, and we hosted last month the African Studies Association UK had a conference. We had over 700 scholars from across the UK and the world that came to Cambridge last month. We also, in the Centre of African Studies, we run an interdisciplinary MPhil program. So every year we have around 15 students that are here for a year taking courses in history or anthropology or politics or geography, as well as learning an African language. And so I think it's really fitting and appropriate that for this final panel, we're going to be starting off by talking about some student initiatives, student-led initiatives, and some opportunities for students at Cambridge. And in fact, our first speaker is a graduate of the MPhil program in African Studies. It's Patrick Hoffman, who's the co-founder of the Cambridge Development Initiative and the African Leadership Program at the Moller Centre in Cambridge. So.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present again at Cambridge Africa Day. Some of you will know the Cambridge Development Initiative. Some of you will have been here at the first Cambridge Africa Day 2 years ago when I first presented about our work. But for those of you who don't, I will just provide a quick fire introduction. We started CDI 4 years ago with a group of 5 to 6 undergraduates. And since then, we've sent 100 Cambridge volunteers out to Tanzania to work on 4 projects in the slums of Dar Es Salaam, Tanzania's largest city. The approach we take is often called youth-led development. So we don't actually broker placements with existing organizations led by adults, but we create our own projects. We design our own projects together with Tanzanian partners and together with Tanzanian University students. And then we also implement these projects together. And I guess we like to think of ourselves as a sort of youth branch of Cambridge Africa, because actually CDI is mostly run by undergraduates. We are now onto our 4th student committee, and the student committee is always supported by a board of trustees. So actually, as you can imagine, in this type of organization, at the ripe old age of 24, I'm pretty much already on my way out. So that's part of how it works. In today's presentation, I just wanted to give you a snapshot of our activities this summer, 2016. And I wanted to draw some reflections on the type of partnership we've built with Tanzanian university students, because I think that partnership is very much in keeping with the spirit of Cambridge Africa and the type of research collaborations that we've been hearing about this morning and this afternoon. And then I want to go on also to present a new program that aims to go a step further in terms of empowering young African leaders like the ones we've worked with at CDI. So let me take you on a really quick journey through our 4 projects. which is in itself, I think, a whirlwind tour of the sort of development challenges that are being faced in a sprawling megacity like Dar es Salaam, and challenges that range from rampant youth unemployment to an education where access isn't the problem, but actually learning is the problem, and to settlements that are largely unserviced in terms of sanitation, health access, etc. And that's the kind of problems we are trying to tackle, even as students. Our first project in entrepreneurship is the Dar Enterprises course, which we have offered in 3 years in a row for always around 20 to 30 Tanzanian University students. And it aims to help them create their own social enterprises working in Dar es Salaam slums. And the sort of basic premise of it is that it's not enough just to throw a random collection of workshops at these students covering marketing, business planning, etc. But really there needs to be a sort of structured approach to innovation and to ideation, to coming up with these business ideas. And so in the photo you see Tanzanian University students interviewing businessmen and other people in the informal settlements, and they then use the insights they gain to come up with viable business ideas. And at the beginning, that was sort of all we did. We didn't have very much funding, but that's one of the big changes that have occurred over the last 3 years. With the help of initiatives like Smart Villages here in Cambridge, so Brian is with us here today, we've been able to offer prize money for enterprises pursuing different topics like off-grid energy. And so in the last 2 years, we've dished out $17,000 in prize money. And you can see some of our winners of this year's conference there. And actually, the sort of format for giving out these prizes is some conference, which we call Dare to Change Dar. Probably see what we did there. And it aims to sort of, I guess, push the idea that the solutions to a lot of challenges in Dar es Salaam are to be found at the intersection of business on the one hand and social impact on the other. And actually, Dar es Salaam is not like Nairobi. It's a very sort of embryonic ecosystem for entrepreneurship. So actually, this is one of the most systematic initiatives there is to help Tanzanians set up social enterprises. The one project where we really get our hands dirty, quite literally most of the time, is our engineering project. And that's in many ways our biggest success story so far. What we've tried to do in a slum called Vingunguti is to introduce a technology called simplified sewage. So this is a very rough and ready sewage network, very thin pipes that are laid directly below the ground. It's very cheap given that sanitation is usually the most expensive type of infrastructure. It can be at least partly built by the community. They can afford to pay for it. And most importantly, they can maintain it themselves. So it's both sustainable, but also empowering to the communities where we built this. And over the last 3 years, we've sort of added 20 households every year, roundabout. And it's now covering 500 people who benefit from improved latrines and a radiant Cambridge blue and the sewage network it's connected to. And one of the really exciting developments of this summer was that we've secured a major agreement with the Tanzanian government, with the Dar es Salaam government, to expand this network to a further 100 households. And that's sort of the start of handing over this technology to the Tanzanian government so that they can push it further themselves. And that's really quite a major development because in urban sanitation in Dar, it's sort of been gridlocked for 15 years while officials were waiting for a World Bank loan that never materialized. And this is a sort of different type of option. It's bottom-up, it's affordable. And the other thing that we've been doing on that project is to pilot new technologies developed here in Cambridge, including a Biodigester, an evapodryer, and a solar oven. I studied history and African studies, so don't ask me how any of these work. But the bottom line is that if we can find a way to produce fertilizer and biogas from the sludge transported in the system, then that holds the key to creating a viable business model. So to creating a commercial incentive to then expand this type of network. I could go into more detail about the network, but as we're getting close to dinner, I thought you might not really appreciate its inner workings. Our third project in health has been one of the most difficult ones. It's obviously a very highly regulated sector, one where it's very difficult for students to add value. At the start, we were very, very interested in basically how we can use market-based solutions to expand access to health goods and medicines from the hospitals to people's doorsteps in the slums. And at first, we were teaching a health entrepreneurship course at the leading medical school, but after last year, we stopped that. We didn't really see the impact. It was just a sort of buzzword in vogue, and people wanted to add that course to their CV, but it wasn't having real impact on the ground. And to us, that ultimately is the most important criterion, I suppose. So this year, our team took quite a different approach, and we created our own social enterprise, which has trained 8 community health workers and equipped them with basic health goods like medicated soap, vitamin supplements, contraceptives that they can sell in their community. And I mean, the obvious benefit of that is having access to those goods for those communities. But the less obvious thing is maybe that these community health workers hardly get paid anything at all. And so this creates a revenue stream that can make their work sustainable. And in the end, they are the front line. I mean, they're on the front line of health provision in these settlements. So, and so far, I mean, this has started 5 weeks ago, I believe. And there have already been 300 sales. So it's going pretty strong. I probably don't have too much time to also talk about education, but basically what we've been trying to do there is to challenge that predominant sort of model of rote learning in Dar es Salaam schools. We've tried to experiment with sort of peer learning, with experiential learning, basically forms of learning that put the student at the center of everything. And one of the things we're particularly proud of is the Think Big challenge this year, which saw teams of secondary students initiate their own sort of school improvement schemes. So for example, at a girls' school, the girls realized, well, just how unclean the school was, and they started a sort of broom-making venture and sort of sold those back to the school, which might seem very small, but it's actually highly significant, we believe, in an environment where students have never started their own projects, where it's always been a one-way street from the teacher at the blackboard to the students. So in that sense, it's, we think, a very significant development. This is just a sort of review of the projects, the results they've achieved over the last 3 years, and the kind of partners that we've engaged. And, well, I think you'll probably agree that, I mean, the basic point is this. This is quite different from what a lot of student volunteering initiatives do. We've tried to sort of push the scope of what volunteers can go beyond, going to teach at a school for 2 months, etc. And yeah, so these are the kind of results we've achieved. Recently, we've been thinking a little bit about how could we share this model with other universities. And we were thinking along David's lines, if we write it up in a really concrete way, then maybe even Oxford can do it. And so we identified the 3 main levers that we think helped to make this work. And you'll notice that actually finance is not one of these levers, because all of these projects have been done with an absolute pittance of funding, with a budget of about £60,000 per year. That's pretty much the salary of a development worker and maybe his driver and cook. So just to give a sort of benchmark. And we felt that one of the really important things was sort of raising the stakes, in a sense, for what students can do. And by that we mean that as a principle, we don't see any development challenge out of scope for action between and by youth. And I think that's why we engaged in something like the sewage network, which seemed very unattainable at the start, and where we were discouraged by many people at the start. But I mean, it's a hit and miss. I mean, it's a sort of experimental approach, and quite frankly, it hasn't always gone well. I mean, in the first year, actually at the first Cambridge Africa Day, I think I presented about a model for primary care that we were trying to pilot in the slums of Dar es Salaam, and we just realized, well, there's no way that students can do that. I know it sort of seems quite common sense, but And as you've seen, now we've moved on to doing something else where we think we can make an impact. And I mean, as many of you know, a third of all the people in sub-Saharan Africa are aged between age 10 and 24. They're youth. And so we think that ultimately this form of youth-led development is actually a very appropriate form of development on top of being a rather cost-effective one. The other point that I think has been a really sort of important success factor has been sort of facilitating between a lot of different stakeholders. And this morning, Professor Leakey talked about the importance of engaging government. And actually, that's been one of the things that's been really fascinating to us. I mean, we've countering our own preconceptions, maybe, we've met a lot of government officials who really want to make their city a better place. And they're even willing to work with youngsters like us to achieve that. And that's been really, really important. And one of our trustees, the way he puts it, is that it's probably because we come at it without an agenda. When we don't have a job on the line, we're not working at a big development agency where national interests might be co-shaping the agenda, as our new Secretary for International Development would like to have it. And so yeah, we don't have that sort of agenda. We just want to have an impact and solve real issues on the ground. And yeah, so that's been one of the factors. But the most important one by far is the partnership we've built with Tanzanian University students. And to be quite honest, and I'm a little ashamed to admit this was very much an afterthought when we started. Frankly, we got a few Tanzanian student volunteers involved in our first year as a sort of free source of labor to supplement what we wanted to do in our projects. That really was the horizon of it. And very, very quickly, that dynamic got totally turned on its head because these students started to contribute the technical expertise they already had and the insights they were gaining from interacting with these communities where they can obviously communicate in Swahili, in their own language, and where they have a much better local understanding. And this has become, yeah, probably one of the most important things on the ground, and the dynamic is now that we have a full partnership between the Tanzanian team and the Cambridge team. Each UK volunteer is matched to a Tanzanian volunteer, and we also have two directors, well, two presidents, a Cambridge president and a Tanzanian president, who work hand in hand. And I mean, I think it's been a key ingredient of achieving these results, but it's definitely also been one of the most rewarding parts of the experience. Because, I mean, in a sense, I think forming friendships and a type of exchange like this is quite common. But then forming friendships that also go on to continuously inspire you, that's a much rarer thing. And yet, I think all of us at CDI have experienced that over these last 3 years, again and again. And that's why I'm very sad that a very, very close friend and partner of us, Ochek Msuva, can't be here with us today. He was meant to speak with me, but his visa was denied at the last minute. But that's the sort of, yeah, dynamic that has been shaped over the last few years. I mean, he often talks about how in Tanzania there's sort of almost a distrust towards young people. Actually, when in our first conversations with local NGOs, they would, explicitly advise against working with young people because they said they were lazy, unreliable, which is totally contrary to what we found. So I think it's been mostly just the opportunity to work on real projects on the ground with some of the resources and some of the capacity that a world-leading university like Cambridge was able to contribute. And in many cases, they can sort of go the rest of the way themselves because many of these volunteers have maybe gone back to their areas of Tanzania and launched their own initiatives, taking successful elements of the projects they were part of. In some of these projects, we have a 100% sort of reapplication rate. They want to take part in the team the next year again. And so these have been really impressive results. And what Ochek has done is actually create his own NGO, Bridge for Change, through which he's trying to transform career education for Tanzanian students. And I say transform, but really what it is, I mean, there is no career education in Tanzania. So he's really building this from scratch. And he's developing lots of very innovative solutions. There's a savings product. There's a new type of event, which he calls dream sharing. And so these are really, really promising solutions. But I think he would also be the first one to say that to do that and to achieve that, he needs further support. And in a way, I feel like CDI has sort of gone as far as it can in terms of providing that. And that's where the new initiative that I wanted to talk to you about comes in. So, I mean, for Ocek, he has these amazing ideas for these interventions, but shaping it together as a sort of coherent program that can be measured, that can be replicated at scale, that's a very difficult task. And also building an organization around this that is financially sustainable, that's even harder because by inclination, he's not necessarily a businessman. And we find the same with some of the other inspiring young Tanzanian leaders that we've met. This is Ahad Katera. He was one of the first graduates of our Dar Enterprises entrepreneurship course, and he has launched a business that turns organic waste into a premium type of fertilizer, which can then be used in peri-urban agriculture, etc. But again, for him, I mean, he's been very, very successful. He's been touring different places in Europe presenting about this business, but at the same time, very often, his team back at home didn't continue working on the product. And so there's these sort of team leadership, team mobilization challenges he faces. And it's these kind of challenges that basically led us to think about a fellowship based partly in Cambridge that could help these young social entrepreneurs and NGO founders. And I've told you some anecdotal stories of why this is needed. Let me give you some numbers. In social entrepreneurship, I mean, there's sort of three accolades that sort of are at the top of the game. There's becoming an Ashoka Fellow, which many of you will be familiar with. So if you're having a systemic impact on a certain social issue, you can be nominated to be an Ashoka Fellow. There are only 67 in sub-Saharan Africa. Many of these are not actually Africans, but expatriates. And just to give you a benchmark, in the UK alone, there's 31. It's even more striking with other programs. Out of nearly 300 Schwab social entrepreneurs, which is a program run at the World Economic Forum, only 13 are from Africa. And the Skoll Award, which was founded by the eBay co-founder Jeff Skoll, no African entrepreneur has ever won that award in 5 years. So I think these are quite striking numbers, and it shows that while we're often sort of well, there's a lot of talk and buzz around impact investment into entrepreneurial solutions for development, often we don't walk the talk and we don't go all the way to support these individuals like Ocek and Katera to succeed. And for the last 6 months, I've been working with the Moller Centre, which some of you will know as an executive education provider that's part of Churchill College here in Cambridge, to create a program that's specifically designed for these young social entrepreneurs. The curriculum isn't fully formed because we want to really shape it together with the intended beneficiaries, so together with the first group of fellows. But very quickly, there would be a sort of 18 to 24 month period. There would be two-week modules in Cambridge, one at the start, where we invite social entrepreneurs like Katera, people like Ocek, who have an idea, they have a team, they have trialed this in a sort of smaller context. And we help them build that team, build that business model, and they can then return to keep working on that and applying those skills back in Tanzania, or back in Ghana, etc. And KPMG are willing to support them sort of on the ground through their own network of offices and doing that sort of validation stage. And then the second module would focus on how do you take this to scale. So the networking skills, sort of how do you get the right stakeholders involved, like government, investors, and yeah, how do you prepare the organizational capacity to take your business or your NGO to scale? And then they can again go back to their country and implement. So a very sort of action-focused model where we directly target people who can apply what they learn, unlike a lot of other sort of leadership programs out there. The condition is that you have something, like have a venture where you can apply these skills, and yeah, the sort of cycle of learning and application. And just very quickly, the way it could work, just to paint a picture of what this could look like in the future, there could be a core program running in Cambridge at the Moller Centre, which sort of sets a gold standard for how these programs can operate, where we can plug in lots of expertise from this room, from different parts of the university, both on the sort of business side, but also on the different issues that they're tackling, be it food security, education, etc. And I think very much in the, following the model of the Cambridge Africa partnerships, there could be network partners, universities like Makerere or Legon, that could adopt this model and with a sort of train the trainers approach and replicate this fellowship on the ground where it's most useful and most directly applicable. And just to sort of show how this could grow, I mean, within 3 years, you could aim to have this program firmly set up within Cambridge with a network of maybe 10 affiliates, which could be part of the Cambridge Africa network, which could be different higher education institutions across the continent. I think this is very, very doable. We have the capabilities to do this, even in this room. And I think the VC was talking about this morning about what it means to be a global university, and about how Cambridge Africa has been pushing the remit of what it means to serve society. And I think, in my view, this is how. This draws on the things that we've learned through the Cambridge Africa program. It builds on the network that's been built, and it sort of walks the talk on being a place where a cradle of future leaders, not just for the UK, but also for other areas of the world. And in that way, it sort of fills the gap between knowledge and action. And I think it's within that gap where leadership is really situated. So I hope this can be almost like a conversation starter, and I would very much welcome further conversations about it after the day is over. Thank you very much.